The other thing is metronomes. Metronomes often come up in discussion. They are, if you don't know what a metronome is, it's a little device that ticks at certain speeds. Sometimes they have a swinging arm that marks the time. Other times it's a digital readout. There's all different kinds today. Some of them just have a flashing or a pulsing light that is in time with the tick so that you can hear it and see it. There's a couple different schools of thought for how to use metronomes. I find them helpful at times. However, they can also very easily become a crutch. They're used far more in classical music circles than they are in folk music traditions, because folk music is largely learned by ear. However, if you're playing Irish music and you have to play so that dancers will dance, lots of times, especially if the dancers are affiliated with a dance school, they have very specific tempos that they need songs played at, and there's not a lot of room for variation, in which case your metronome's going to be your best friend, because then you can punch in how fast they want it and you've got it right there so that you can learn it and kind of get that in your head and in your body. But they can become a crutch. I have known a couple musicians in my time where they couldn't sight read anything without having that metronome going, and the only time that they did not play with a metronome was when they were playing for people, and the rest of the time it was always with a metronome. And it was very hard for them to function in a organic fashion with other musicians that way. So they can be helpful, but they can also become a crutch. So just remember, if you're using one, that they are a tool. Use it to help you figure out where the notes are supposed to be through your subdivisions. I'll talk more about subdivisions in another video, but basically whole notes is made up of 2 half notes, and a half note's made up of 2 quarter notes, and so on and so forth, down all the way through eighth notes, 64ths, 32nds, etc., etc. And metronomes are great for helping you figure out where those subdivisions are, especially if you're playing complicated rhythms. But they are a tool. They're handy, and they're good to have in your arsenal of tools for playing music, because there may also be instances when somebody that you're playing music with will go, "How fast is that supposed to go?" And then you can let them know. And it's standard. It's a nice standard way of measuring the speed of music. So if you tell somebody quarter note needs to be at 120, they can go home to their metronome, and that's the tempo that they're going to have. So that's kind of nice if you're trying to coordinate how fast things are going with a group. And the last thing to remember, practice does make perfect. It is, everybody says that. It's bandied around without even hardly a thought in music circles, and a lot of times I think there's a large consensus that you need a hefty amount of talent in order to play music, and so a lot of new players will get discouraged. But talent may help, but practice really does make perfect. And I say that because I've seen lots of new musicians in my time, and I've seen ones that have an incredible amount of talent in their little finger not really have that big of an interest in music because it's so easy. It doesn't present a challenge, and so then they don't put in the work. Whereas a new musician that maybe doesn't have a lot of talent but has a lot of drive for it, a lot of motivation, like they really, really want to play music, they're going to be the ones spending the time practicing, spending the time rehearsing, spending the time reading about music and how to play better. And at the end of the day, they will have progressed farther over time than the musician that doesn't put in the time. So practice, taking the time to practice, really does make perfect. So how long are we looking at? Warm-ups, I usually don't like to warm up any more in about 10 minutes. Any longer than that, and I find I run the risk of getting fatigued. If I'm going to be playing for a couple hours for people dancing, less warm-up time is a little bit better, but you need to warm up at least 5 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes is my ballpark figure for warm-ups. When you're practicing, you want to run through the piece once, maybe twice. When you isolate your treble sections, you want to practice them enough that you're getting confident with them, but you don't want to do it so much that you're getting totally sick of them. If you're starting to get frustrated, really I hate this piece of music, frustrated, put down the instrument. Take a break. You can come back to it tomorrow. Sometimes the key will sink in overnight. I've had that happen more times than I can count. I will get to the point where I feel like I'm beating my head against a wall trying to get a treble section down. If I take a break, it gives my brain time to organize what I've been working on, and it'll happen. So keep that in mind. You want to work on them enough that you're getting confident in how you're playing them, but you don't want to make yourself sick of them. If you're starting to get sick of them, take a break and come back to it tomorrow. Ideally, you have more than one day to prepare a piece. And then when you go back through the whole piece, you can take that through as many times as you want, but again, enough that you're getting confident in it. If you're starting to get really frustrated, take a break. All in all, as far as how long I like to practice at least 30 to 45 minutes a day. If you are a younger student, and when I say younger, I mean under 10, 15 to 20 minutes is usually perfect. Or if you have younger people in your house who are wanting to learn music, 15 to 20 minutes a day worth of practice is plenty for younger kids. If you're an adult, 30 to 45 minutes is a great time to practice at home. If you're really feeling good and really enjoying yourself, practice more, by all means. I have oftentimes sat out on my front porch here with the traffic going by on the road and played for 2 hours, 3 hours even, just because I was having fun. And it was practice. I was working on something and it was practice and it was fun. And so I just didn't stop until look at the clock and it's like, oh, I need to start lunch or whatever. But ballpark figures, if you are or have younger students under 10 in your household, 15 to 20 minutes is ample time to practice every day. If you're older than that, minimum 30 to 45 minutes worth a day. And that's going to pay off dividends in the future. The other thing is, how do you keep up with practice? I always say instruments in their case are out of sight and out of mind. If you can, leave your instrument on a stand or in a place where you're going to see it every day, but it's still safe. That's the key. It's got to still be safe. You don't want your cat or your dog knocking it over or your kids grabbing it and banging something against it. But if you can leave it out somewhere where you'll see it, you will practice more often. And oftentimes have found that picking up, playing a piece through a couple times, and then setting it down and going about my morning chores or my day or whatever, if I do that a few times during the day, it actually helps me pick stuff up a little bit quicker and a little bit easier that way, because then I'm not, like if I'm really crunched for time and I can't just sit down and do one solid block, if you do 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, and 10 minutes here, you've made your time for the day. And you can still use these guidelines for practice, just in an abbreviated form. Maybe sit down and go, okay, I know I was having trouble with that spot. I'm going to work through that slowly and work through that. Put the instrument down, walk away, do something else for a little bit, come back to it. Okay, now let's focus on this other section that I was having trouble on. Do the same thing. It can still work. But by and large, instruments in cases, great for long time storage, not so great for developing good practice habits, because if they're in their case, they're out of sight, out of mind. You can stick it in your case and you won't pick it up for a week, 2 weeks, or indefinitely. You don't want to be that person, not if you really want to focus on it. So it's easier to just have it out where you can see it, because if you see it, you'll be like, oh, I need to practice. So those are my thoughts on how to develop good practice habits, how I personally like to structure practice sessions when I'm really working on something. And as always, if you have questions, drop them in the comments. And if you enjoy this video, find it useful, or love the fact that a self-employed independent music teacher is doing this, please consider supporting my continued teaching via Patreon. Patreon.com/HeatherTheBard. Every little bit helps, and I'm greatly appreciative that you're taking the time to watch and maybe donate as well. Thank you very much. Happy playing.